Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this extraordinary full council meeting, and welcome also to members of the public who are watching this meeting via our YouTube channel, and of course welcome to our very special guests Peter and Pearl. Lovely to see you both. At this meeting we're here to consider the proposal to confer the title of Honorary Alderman of the City and County of Bristol to former councillor Peter Abraham. We'll just start with some safety information for those who weren't in the room earlier. Due to the work on the ramp outside, the evacuation procedure is slightly different from normal. In the event of an evacuation, we'll need to take the stairs down to the ground floor, exit through the back of the building and congregate near the cathedral. You'll be aware, of course, there are screens separating councillors, which means that we don't need to wear masks while seated at the desks. If you're getting up to speak or to move around the building, though, please do put masks on and only remove your mask at the lectern in order to speak. Item 2 is apologies for absence. We have apologies at the moment from councillors Ali, Cheney, Goggin, Hornchan, Jammer, Mack and Wilcox. Are there any other apologies that anyone knows of? No? Excellent, thank you. In which case we move to item 3, the main business of the meeting. As set out in the report, on the recommendation of the Audit Committee Values and Ethics Subcommittee, full council is asked to approve the appointment of and confer the title of Honorary Alderman of the City and County of Bristol to former councillor Peter Abraham. And I'll call Councillor Galandris of the Conservative Group to propose the motion.
My Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure, privilege and honour for me to propose that Council confers on Emeritus Councillor Peter Abraham the title of Honorary Alderman of the City and County of Bristol. New members may not be familiar with Peter Abraham and his long service to Bristol, but can I assure colleagues he is a living legend. Peter was first elected to Bristol City Council in 1966. He was for many years Father of the House and by far and away our longest serving City Councillor. 55 years of public service. I'm delighted that we have many young members recently elected to Council, but I'm not sure how many of you will want to devote 55 years of your work to Council work, of your life to Council work. 55 years is truly an amazing stretch of time. When Peter was first elected, many of us here weren't even born. England hadn't won the World Cup, man hadn't walked on the moon, beer cost 9p a pint, and you could buy a decent house for £3,000. In 1966, you couldn't actually stand to be a councillor until you were 21, and that actually didn't change until 2007. So having been elected in his 20s, Peter was, by the standards of 1966, a very young councillor indeed. During his 55 years in local politics, Peter has undertaken virtually every civic role. He has been Lord Mayor 3 times, Council Deputy Leader, Executive Member for Education and Lifelong Learning. He has chaired virtually every council committee, including allotments, planning and public rights of way. He has sat on almost every outside body, including Avon Fire Authority, Avon and Somerset Police Panel, Bristol Cultural Development Partnership, Bristol University Court, Bristol Buildings Preservation Trust, Destination Bristol, Broadmead Board, Matthew of Bristol Trust, Lower Severn Drainage Board, Downs Committee. The list goes on, and frankly, I'm exhausted just going through the list. Imagine sitting on all those boards and committees. Amazing. I'd like to take this opportunity to pay a personal tribute to you, Peter. When I arrived in Bristol in the 1980s, Peter was my local councillor. Seeing Peter engage with local residents and get stuck into local issues was instrumental in getting me involved in local politics. I became Peter's fellow ward councillor in 2002. Peter was always generous and unstinting in his help and support to me. He was a brilliant mentor and amazingly patient as I slowly learnt the political ropes of civic life. Peter, a very sincere thank you. They say that behind every successful politician is a long-suffering partner. I'm sure Peter would readily agree that without Pearl's magnificent support, he would not have been able to devote so much time and energy to public service. So may I place on record our thanks to you, Pearl, for your part in Peter's lifetime in local government. In summary, my Lord Mayor, there are numerous councillors and former councillors who have devoted many years to Bristol City Council. But Peter Abraham's long record of service is truly exceptional. Few, if any of us, will ever match his contribution to Bristol. Peter, a born and bred Bristolian, you can justifiably take pride in what you have achieved for Bristol. I'm truly honoured to have been your fellow councillor, and I'm delighted to now move the report proposing you as an alderman of our wonderful city and county of Bristol. I so move, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. And I call Councillor Eddy of the Conservative Group to second the motion.
Lord Mayor, how does one try to pay tribute to someone whose impressive service to this city on Bristol and Avon councils goes back to 1966? You have to admit Peter's timing is perfection. This country won over Germany in soccer at the beginning and when he retired. So Peter, well done. Peter Abraham married his wife Pearl in '64 and they purchased their first family home in Stockwood, where Peter subsequently became the councillor. But his ward didn't just embrace suburban Stockwood, but it reached across Whitchurch and even included the Hartcliffe 5 high-rise flats. It was the biggest and most demanding ward in Bristol at the time, the size of a small town. Peter became the youngest Bristol Council Committee chairman in '67 and quickly scaled the greasy pole. He became chairman of Avon Community Leisure, Bristol's Land and Buildings Committee, and Avon Fire. He was also, as John has said, Tory group leader, a cabinet member for education, and a distinguished Lord Mayor 3 times, with Pearl, his devoted supporter and wife, being a superb lady mayoress. On top of his demanding day job, he also once rescued a local MEP who flew into Bristol Airport, somewhat the worse for wear from drink. As someone who got involved in politics relatively young, I feel privileged to have known individuals from both sides of this chamber who were genuine giants, motivated by true public service and lucky if they received more than the price of the stamps to their constituents. Peter Abraham was one of those giants, although, as he has remarked, perhaps his stature hasn't prevented him from becoming a giant. I first met Peter when I was 16 in a house in Fishponds, where he was the speaker for the body Peace Through NATO. I invited him to the sixth form Bedminster Downs School. He still recalls the occasion. The head welcomed him and said he'd be fine. However, he cautioned Peter, but watch that fellow with ginger hair. He's trouble. That fellow is still trouble now, but the hair is less striking. Later, I was privileged to serve as Peter's deputy and succeeded him as Tory leader in 2005 when he became Lord Mayor for the second time. He has truly taught me a great deal, but that is nothing compared to his contribution towards Bristol. Peter, you truly deserve this honour. Please enjoy it. I beg to second.
Thank you. And I now call Councillor Holland to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and it's a great pleasure to speak on behalf of the Labour Group in support of the recommendation to make Peter an alderman of the city that he loves and has served so well. If you've read the report, by the way, I had to spend the last few minutes striking out bits of my speech because it's already all been said, so I'll try and say something different. But if you've read the report, you'll see that the criteria for becoming an alderman are: if the person has provided eminent service to the council throughout a long and distinguished period of public service. Well, at 55 years, I think that that's a tick. That he's served the person has served a minimum period of 2 electoral terms. Now, I lost count because, like me, we had elections at odd times because of Avon, because of boundary redistribution, but I reckon it's at least 18 elections that you've won, Peter, and holding a significant position of public responsibility, e.g. the Lord Mayor, which has already been referred to. He held thrice, just like Dick Whittington, the executive member and the chair of umpteen committees. So I think that we can be reassured that Peter qualifies. So Peter was first elected in 1966, everybody knows that now, which is a year much in people's minds at the moment, because obviously that was when there was a Labour landslide majority at the general election. And it's impossible to imagine now how much Bristol has changed in those 55 years that Peter has been on the council, but also how much the City Council has changed in that time. Indeed, Peter was elected to the City and County of Bristol, and he was here when the system of local government was changed by the Local Government Act in 1972, and the County of Avon was created in 1974, and Peter was a member there for a period. And then he was also here when it was abolished in 1996. Now, I was here at that time, and I well remember the joy in that chamber, not in here, as we regarded it as Bristol getting its powers back. He was also here when the system of local government was changed again by the Local Government Act in 2000, when the strong leader and cabinet system was brought in, and indeed he was a member of a cabinet in that time. I also think, but I haven't absolutely been able to verify this, that one of the earlier local government acts was the one that abolished the ability of aldermen being able to vote. So Peter, I'm just making sure that you're aware that when this honour is bestowed on you later, that you will not be able to vote. So despite Peter's hugely long service, my experience of him is he has always recognised that it's a changing city and a changing city council. And he's embraced that, and he's encouraged members of all parties to grab every opportunity that they have when you're elected to this wonderful city. And I particularly want to mention Peter's internationalist view, his championing of our twinning arrangements, and I hope that you've noticed, Peter, that the committee rooms have been renamed along with the names of our twin cities. And his close links with some of the diverse communities in Bristol, especially the Bristol Punjab Association, and I'm sure that your friends from that association and from the Chinese community are watching this online. And at any events organised by those groups, it's easy to see the regard that Peter and Pearl are held in by those people. Finally, and those new members, you won't know this, but when the council debates used to be perhaps a little less managed than they are now. Peter was famous for indicating that he wanted to speak and getting up and saying, as his opening comments, "I hadn't intended to speak in this debate." Well, I had intended to speak in this debate because it's my great privilege to be able to speak in favour of becoming an alderman, and I hope that that will soon be passed by the chamber. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I now call Councillor Pulteney to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. What else to say, really? I would like to share one of my experiences of this gentleman. I first met Councillor Abraham on the licensing committee when I was newly made chair, and I shared that meeting with another long-standing elder statesman, Councillor Ron Stone, who's sadly no longer with us. And I have to admit, as the new chair, I was slightly resentful of this old guard I found myself amongst. And then one day, the most wonderful thing happened. Councillor Abraham made a mistake. And I would point it out. I could stamp my authority on this committee I was now on. And then at that moment, Councillor Stone shot me a look. And Councillor Stone could say an awful lot with one raised eyebrow. And that look said three things. One, whilst Councillor Abraham might seem very genial and very affable, don't mistake him for someone who doesn't have a mind like a steel trap. Two, he is an absolute master of his brief. He will know every dot and comma of the report in front of him. And three, he has been doing this longer than you have been alive. You won't win. Sunshine. And then Councillor Abraham proceeded in a very gentlemanly and very gracious and very polite way to wipe the floor with me. And he did so forensically and in perfect detail as to why he was right and I was not. And I realized at that moment I had an awful lot to learn, but that if I watched him like an absolute hawk, I might learn just a little bit of it from him. I'm sure that he knows the esteem and affection with which he's held in this chamber. I'm genuinely sad that the new councillors won't have the experience to learn from him as I did just a little bit. And every bone in my body wants me to say it's time to raise a glass. But for now, I will have to make do with a very heartfelt thank you. And just as a reminder of something, I think it was Councillor Windows once said to me, never, ever underestimate the small businessman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Kent to speak for the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. What am I going to say, Peter? So, the formal bit, on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group, I speak in support of the motion to award the title of Honorary Alderman of the City and County of Bristol upon Peter Abraham. So our former Father of the House, as we all now know, was first elected in 1966. Now, by now in your head, that has already become 1066, and the two dates are not that far apart. And of course, as we know, Peter was actually elected to the corporation before the council even became formed. One thing I don't think anybody's pointed out, he was not actually elected as a Conservative. Peter was elected as a member of the Citizens' Party, and in fact was the last serving councillor to have represented the Citizens' Party. So there's a little one for your fact, but more importantly, he was elected for the best part of Bristol, Stockwood Ward. What am I saying? How can I be saying Stock? Because Stockwood Ward covered Whitchurch. So Peter had the glorious thing of representing the good people of Whitchurch from 1966. And some of my residents do genuinely still remember Peter as being their councillor. I won't say if when they mention this, they also then follow that up with good statements or not so good statements. But in politics, the key thing is to be remembered, I believe, not whether or not they like you. Unfortunately, they do generally like you. Unfortunately for you, Peter, you then had to go on and represent Stoke Bishop. I know that was a step down from Whitchurch, but you're always welcome to come back and visit us folks in Whitchurch. So Peter, as we've already heard, has represented the council at multiple levels. I did have a nice list, like all other speakers. I've been spending most of the last 10 minutes pressing delete on my speech. But of course, you were Lord Mayor 3 times. And during that period, you on occasion did have to tell me to sit down and shut up. And you were quite, well, you were a bit, well, no, you weren't always that polite. Sometimes you did say, you, shut up. And you were quite right to do that as Lord Mayor, because newer members, you're all very polite. You probably don't quite know what the chamber was like before they put those evil devices in here called cameras. And our residents could see the way we were behaving. And then suddenly we all had to start behaving far better. So the good news for current Lord Mayors is we're all a lot more politer than we used to be. Oh, the good old days. So anyway, I suspect nobody has ever done as much as you have done as councillor. And if I'm going to be honest, I suspect nobody else will match your record, at least in this city and possibly country. You've worked across, not just here in this council, but across our communities. I think it's already been talked about your work with the various exchange groups, city exchange groups. I just want to briefly touch on, I know you are quite involved in the Bordeaux and Hanover societies, especially the Hanover Society. You were a supporter of the Hanover Sports Exchange as one, and was on the Bristol Hanover Executive Council. I know in this capacity you did help set up a working group to mark the 60th anniversary of the original founding of this relationship, with a series of fundraising events. One highlight saw 4,000 citizens participate in a grand picnic at Bristol Zoo, attended by civic delegations from across Europe. I think that's quite an achievement, and something I doubt I will replicate in Whitchurch, but we'll give it a good try. I know you did visit as Lord Mayor. We had about 600 people there at an event once, so thank you for that. I'll genuinely miss your speeches, though. You had the perfect mix of humour, insight, and just that weaving of the political dagger, as any good speech should have. I'm afraid mine currently falls short. I will work on that, though, Peter. So on behalf of the Liberal Democrat councillors and on behalf of our residents, we'd just like to say thank you for what you've done, and that we'll be supporting the motion. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd now like to invite Councillor Pearce to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Peter Abraham. So, the term legend has been somewhat devalued in recent times. No longer reserved for those able to draw a sword from a stone. I've been called a legend just for coming back from the bar carrying crisps. The walls around and above us, here in this place, bear the names of many former city leaders. Some on this wall are legends, and I invite you to pick your own. Some of the more recent members on this wall may at some point become legends. Peter, whose name is up there 3 times already. Peter, as has already been said, you are already a legend. Your achievements are legion. We will miss you in the chamber because you represent something that I fervently believe in, which is institutional memory. And you very often said in the chamber, brought to light something that many of us weren't around to witness first time or have long since forgotten. Aside from your achievements here, I'm really pleased to be doing this because of a personal interaction that we've we've had. Many in the room won't realise that we first met nearly 50 years ago. I was the Saturday boy. I used to work from 10 to 4 on a Saturday in one of Peter's petrol stations. And I rapidly advanced to be a shift leader at 16, to be a shift leader on a Saturday night, and then the next Sunday morning. So I was a shift leader and a key holder. And that was my first experience of proper work, a proper job with proper responsibilities. So we went on for a few years after that as well. And it was very nice to run in. I already knew you were a politician. And when I first stood for election, I thought, oh, this probably means I've got to deal with Peter again. But it's always been a pleasure. It's always been entertaining and a learning experience. So, Peter, enjoy your retirement. I hope it's a long and happy one. And yeah, we're going to be voting for this. Of course we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Morris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank the other parties for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. What can I say that has not been said already? During Peter's political service, he has shown such commitment and dedication, helping and serving the city and county of Bristol, his home, in such a splendid fashion. And Pearl, must also thank you for your support and commitment, both as the wife of a councillor, which my wife will testify is not an easy thing, but also as a splendid lady mayoress, representing the city in such a dignified manner. But it's only fitting that a contribution comes tonight from Stockwood Ward, where it all began, for young Mr. Abraham. There was, of course, the famous story of when Peter was so concerned about potholes appearing on Stockwood Lane that he camped out overnight. But it was also the beginning of a very long, dear and cherished friendship between my family and Peter and Pearl. Back before his election in '66, young Mr. Abraham knocked on a door in Stockwood and was greeted with the words that we would all like to hear. Yes, we are voting for you. And would you like any help campaigning? My grandmother introduced Peter to her two daughters, my mother Catherine and her sister Valerie, who delivered, canvassed and supported Peter, along with my father before they married and others. It was the start of a very long and dear friendship. In fact, Peter and Pearl were at the wedding of my parents in 1969, and Peter delivered the eulogy at my father's funeral in 2016. Like his commitment to the city, a steadfast and welcome presence for our family. So Peter and Pearl, on behalf of the Morris family, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank you for your service, and we wish you both very many years of happiness. God bless.
Thank you. And finally, I'd like to invite Councillor Gollop to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's fascinating to hear everything I might have said be said already. But it will come as no surprise, Lord Mayor, to you or to Peter and Pearl, that I think every member of the Conservative Group would have gladly stood up and spoken and paid tribute to Peter today. And I'm very grateful to the other parties who have given up their extra speakers to give us the chance to do so. It ended up as a toss-up between Councillor Leslie Alexander and myself as to which of us should speak, and I leave it to members to guess who won. But it is appropriate for Leslie and I, because although we've been councillors for 20 years and 19 years, we've both worked for the Conservative Party voluntarily for many years before that, and working with Peter during that time. I admit I was not campaigning when Peter first stood in '66. I was a little young at that point, I would hasten to add. But we have campaigned and worked together over that period of time. Now, the difficulty is when someone's been involved for as long as Peter has, that almost everything Peter has done for longer than I have done. But I have one thing that distinguishes me. Peter has never been my councillor, but for a good number of years, I've been Peter's councillor, and I think that gives me a really good excuse to stand up here and speak. But everybody has been really complimentary about Peter. And I have to say, I think we all know that great leaders also can be really quite frustrating and quite challenging. And I'm looking at my group colleagues here, and I think they will agree that Peter also fitted that bill remarkably well. I can tell you, Lord Mayor, there is nothing more infuriating than having drafted a press release in absolute detail, perfecting every word, to find that the only thing the media are interested in is Peter's off-the-cuff comment that he managed to make in the course of a debate. And that happened so many times that I gave up doing it. My Lord Mayor, we have in Peter and in Pearl exemplars of public life and public service. I think it is wonderful that we have the opportunity today to pay tribute and pay our thanks. If it was down to me, and it isn't, the title of Honorary Alderman is not enough. I'd be giving Peter the freedom of the city, and I'd be giving Pearl a sainthood. Peter, Pearl, for all you've done for our great city, thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And so now I ask full council to formally confirm the appointment of Peter Abraham as an honorary alderman of the city and county of Bristol. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Alderman Abraham, may I be the first to congratulate you. I'm going to come down and present your badge and certificate. And while I do that, I think a round of applause might be in order.
I really didn't intend to say anything because, and listening to all that, there really is nothing else to say. Mayor, first of all, Lord Mayor, thank you and congratulate you on being Lord Mayor. And I hope you enjoy your year of office and the contribution that you make to our city is important. 1966 is a long time ago, and I was very young. We'd only really recently been married, and Pearl had to put up with canvassing every night fairly quickly into our marriage. We bought our house in Stockwood for £3,041. John, you were spot on with the price of what you could buy a house in those days. But it was a house that was built by George Wimpey in cooperation with Bristol City Council. And it made available to a lot of young people houses that they could buy. I was fighting for Pearl to go out because every other woman was pushing a pram, and it was a very interesting place to live. Back in 1966, we were 112 members of council. It's been referred to, but I'm going to say it again, aldermen could vote. And aldermen had most of the important, if not all of the important jobs of the council. And that was when I became the chairman of the allotments committee, when we took control, the Citizen Party, in 1967, that the headline was "Councillor becomes committee chairman." It was a real rare thing. And I wondered why I'd been made this chairman until I realised that the chairman of planning, who also was the land committee chairman at the time, realised that I owned, as the allotment chairman, more land than anybody else, because we had a lot of land in the city, and he wished to make sure it was developed in certain ways. So I had a job to do. There's so much one can say. I was blessed with colleagues that were wonderful to work with. And I mean colleagues of all parties. I really enjoyed my friendship with people in the Labour Party. I don't think we had Liberal Democrats then. We didn't even have a Liberal. But we had Liberal, yes, one became, and we had an independent called Gwynville Lawson that I worked with and got on very well with. And we worked together. And I do recommend it. We can have our differences in there, but at the end of the day, it's this city that is important and the people that we represent. And my colleagues, can I thank you, John, for being a wonderful colleague. The late Marmaduke Alderson, who was Lord Mayor and Chairman of Housing, and my very good friend who got me into this, really, Michael Withers, who is still with us and wishes he could be with us today. He is an alderman, and he's ready, like me, to take over if called for. I really don't wish to go on, but the wall has been referred to in the names, and things come back in. If you've been about as long as I have, you've got loads and loads of stories. I'm walking through there one day, and the commissioner, we had commissioners that used to sit at the desk there. He said, Mr. Abraham, he said, you'll be interested in what they're doing in there. So what's that? He said, they're putting your name up, because they used to do them in batches. So, I said, I'll go and have a look at that. And I came in, and there's one of those towers, you know, the scaffolding towers. I had 3 ladders going up to it. And I stood basically there, looking up at that name going up for the first time. And this man said to me, you seem very interested in this, sir. And I said, well, I am. It's my name that you're putting there. He said, don't move. And he came down one ladder, then he came down the next ladder, then he came down the next one. He said, may I shake your hand? He said, I usually do gravestones. I've never met the client before. And I look back at those days in 1966. The city docks were still open. I sat throughout the whole period on the committee that closed the city docks and all the controversy that went with that. Portbury was just a dream, and we were having the debates there. We owned and operated the airport. Our dream was to get to 1 million passengers. Don't think we actually ever achieved it under our control. And if this pandemic hadn't come, we probably would have surpassed those numbers many times. So it was a very, very different council. It was a committee structure, and we were made lots and lots of decisions at full council meeting. But we knew that we couldn't go on as we were, and we'd have to change. And I got hate mail when I was made by my group the sort of chairman of the group that cut the committee structure from 43 committees to 28, I think it was. And people were coming on the phone saying to me, you ruined my life. Little did they know what was about to come in the years ahead. All those that spoke, Thank you very much indeed for your kind words. They're greatly appreciated. And just a word of warning. With the help and the wonderful help I'm getting through the National Health, and can I say I'm sorry I can't stand up. I have been able to stand recently, but this leg has gone pretty bad this morning, and this has come on today, and I was unable to walk this morning at all. So sorry about that. But if between this wonderful help that the National Health is giving me and my wife, I just might be back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are now going to break for refreshments before we start the full council meeting at 6 p.m. Refreshments will be down in the cash hall, and we'll ask Labour and Liberal Democrat groups to leave the room through the door to your left here, through the chamber and down the stairs at that end of the building, and Conservative and Green groups to leave through the side and down the stairs at that end of the building. And we will be back here to start full council at 6 o'clock. Thank you.